I'll tell you something, in the pubs and out there on Struggle Street, there's plenty of talk about net zero carbon dioxide emissions, but it's got nothing to do with Glasgow. The battler on Struggle Street, on the Conservative side of politics, is saying, what has happened to the Liberal Party? And they're saying the same thing about the National Party. The world has gone woke. That includes business, media, sport. The great South African cricketer, 28-year-old Quinton de Kock, a magnificent player who's captained South Africa in all three forms of the game, refused to take the knee in the World T20 match against the West Indies, and the globe goes mad. The South African Cricket Board had instructed the whole team to take the knee. And now the man who captained South Africa in every form of the game finds his career is in jeopardy. Quinton de Kock, to his credit, objected on two fronts. What was the South African Cricket Board doing? Demanding what its players do. They'd previously been free to make such a gesture as they saw fit. And Quinton de Kock himself has come from a mixed-race family, and he argued these things are personal decisions. He stood up for his right to decide. Who's going to fight against this rubbish? I suspect the political fallout around the world will be very significant. People have had enough of this world of one idea, toe the line or cop the boot. In the pubs, Liberals are saying, where is my party of freedom of choice and the healthy exchange of views and ideas? Professor James Allan is the Garrick Professor of Law at the University of Queensland. We often talk to him because he makes sense. He's written a splendid piece recently, quote, what direction would the Federal Liberal Party take if it were to lose the next election? Well, I'm not here to say what people might be pleased with. I'm here to say it as I see it, and I'll tell you this certainty. Remember, I was right at the last federal election. I was right at the last state election. Scott Morrison cannot win 76 seats at the next federal election. The question is, can the other side? Professor James Allan joins me. James, thank you for your time. Oppositions don't win elections, governments lose them. What do you think the Liberal base is saying over all these issues that Scott Morrison has presided over?
Well, thank you for having me, Allan. And I was listening to Senator McGraw, wondering how many times he voted in the party room coup against Mr. Abbott. Did he vote once for Mr. Turnbull, or did he vote twice? I couldn't remember. I mean, part of the problem we have right now dates back to that coup against Abbott. I think there's too many MPs in the Liberal party room who don't seem to share the values of the voting base, and that's pretty clear. It's very disappointing. If you mentioned the U.S. and in the U.S., the Republicans have learned that you fight on the cultural issues because everything is downstream of culture. Education system, general wokeness, all of that feeds into the economy and everything else. And so we have a political party now that went to the 2019 election and in fact has run every election since 2010 against the global warming scare, and they've completely capitulated. I just do not understand it.
Yes, I mean, just on that point, how disturbing is it that the National Party gave ground? Now, the National Party should simply have said, now listen, this is our position, we're holding firm here, and they would have been proven right because Glasgow is going to achieve absolutely nothing. Now, Morrison took with him to Glasgow a whole heap of problems. He now brings home Macron and Biden saying he deceived them. I mean, you've written about Morrison's, quote, near total lack of values and no support for freedom-related issues. How much is that biting out there?
Well, I mean, I don't pretend to have my finger on the pulse of Liberal voters, but it's certainly biting with me. If you look at the pandemic, say, and you look at governors like DeSantis in Florida, who stood up. I don't know how many viewers know, but as of today, Florida has the lowest COVID rate of all 50 U.S. states. No vaccine passports, no mask mandates. It's been completely open for well over a year. 3 times more, the rate's 3 times higher in mask and vaccine mandated California. It's almost double in New York. And he had core values, and one of them was we are not going to go along with the greatest inroads in our civil liberties in 300 years. It plays out in hate speech laws.
He legislated against any restrictions. Now, before coronavirus here, Scott Morrison refused to move on Section 18C, the hate speech laws. He stood by while every conceivable freedom has been taken away. Lockdowns with a metaphor of the destruction of freedom. Andrews introduced the last lockdown when there were 6 cases. He lifted the lockdown when there were approximately 2,000. I mean, aren't you entitled to ask, why Liberal leaders supported lockdowns in the first place with all the attendant destruction of freedoms.
It's bitterly disappointing. It would have cost him nothing to criticize Dan Andrews. I mean, the Liberal opposition in Victoria can't seem to muster up the courage to criticize the man who's probably the most despotic leader in the democratic world. He's certainly right up there. You saw it when Mr. Morrison had no time for Section 18C hate speech repeal. It doesn't create a single job, he said. Well, in fact, it creates millions of jobs. Because if you don't have a core commitment to freedom, when something like a pandemic comes along, you just cave into a public health elite that has gotten just about every modeling prediction wrong. They haven't gotten anything right.
But as I speak to you, Section 92 of the Constitution guarantees we should be able to, put it in layman's language, cross from New South Wales into Queensland. Scott Morrison doesn't defend that. And Andrews...
He did not take it to the High Court.
Yeah.
I think my own view, and of course, in a counterfactual world, you can't know for sure. But my view is if the federal government had taken the case instead of Mr. Clive Palmer, I think the High Court would have sided with the federal government to open the borders.
Yeah.
But we'll never know that.
But I mean, we've got the world's toughest lockdowns in Victoria. What have they accomplished? You wrote, accomplished nothing, you said. It risked the lives of the young and those with small businesses, those without public service jobs, the public service was fine, and not a word of criticism from Scott Morrison. Now, to come to your point, if the federal coalition were to lose the next election, you say there are two alternatives. The Liberal Party might rediscover its base, stand up for those values that it's supposed to embody, but no longer does, small government, individual freedom, keep government spending under control instead of $1 trillion of debt, ditch the virtue signalling or the moralising about net zero, etc. So do you think the Liberal Party will move back to recapturing what they've abandoned, or will it say, well, forget it, get rid of the remnant Conservatives and we'll sit a fraction to the right of Labor? What's it to be?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a hard one. I think it's 50-50. If you look at the state level, the Liberal Party oppositions at the state level are just backboneless, pathetic entities. They don't seem to have any values at all. I don't know what they stand for here in my Queensland, and it's not obvious what they stand for in Victoria. Even where they're in government, like South Australia, they're just pretty awful. So you hope they'll do better at the national level. I mean, part of the problem seems to be that they haven't read the political entrails around the world. If you look at the UK or the US and Canada or Britain, what you see is that the left-right split is changing so that the cities are almost overwhelmingly left. And it turns out that people who 30 years ago, high-income people who vote right, they now vote left. I'm speaking in general terms. But the 30 wealthiest counties in the US all voted for Clinton in 2016 and Biden in 2020. So rich people can afford to virtue signal. And so if your goal is to keep Keong for Mr. Frydenberg at all costs, you're going to have to be a pretty left-wing party. But I think that's a mistake. I think that the split is going to be suburbs and out there will be the right-wing party, and they can actually run on values, and you'll get the odd inner city seat. But more and more, the inner cities are just gone. They're just gone to the right.
Yeah, I think it's good to talk to you, James. I think slowly but imperceptibly, I think that balance is changing. And I think that's what I'm saying. In the pubs and everywhere now, people are anxious. They're saying, well, hang on, is this the National Party or the Liberal Party? And I think pressures are going to emerge here. And they'll either dump the people who are there or make sure that the people who are there make change. I'm not too sure that the people in the coalition are capable of making that change because they're not sure what they believe in. Professor James Allan, great to talk to you. All the best.
You too, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. There it is. It's an enormous challenge, all of this. But, if you don't stand for nothing, so if you don't know what road you're on, it doesn't matter what direction you take, does it? Back after the break.